What happens when essential resources run out? Look at this map of the world and imagine the supply chains that keep civilization running. Water, metals, energy, food. These aren't infinite. And what we're facing in the next few decades will reshape everything. In 2023, the world consumed roughly 100 billion tons of raw materials. That's metals, minerals, fossil fuels, biomass, everything. And that number is growing every single year. Meanwhile, the easy resources, the ones sitting near the surface and simple to extract, they're running out. We're having to dig deeper, go further, spend more energy and money to get what we need. And as we do, the environmental cost skyrockets. The economic strain increases, the geopolitical tensions rise. Think about water for a second. 2 billion people already live in areas of high water stress. That means they don't have reliable access to clean water year-round. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers that supported civilizations for thousands of years are drying up. The Aral Sea, which used to be one of the 4 largest lakes in the world, is basically gone. We drained it for agriculture, and now entire regions are destabilized because of it. This wasn't some natural disaster. This was a choice. Between 1960 and 1998, the Soviet Union diverted the rivers feeding the Aral Sea to irrigate cotton fields in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. The sea lost 90% of its volume. Fishing communities that had thrived there for centuries disappeared overnight. The exposed seabed became a toxic dust bowl. The region's climate changed, winters got colder, the soil became contaminated with salt and chemicals. Tens of thousands of people had to leave. This is what resource depletion looks like in real time. It's not abstract, it's not theoretical. It's people losing their livelihoods, their homes, their way of life. Or consider rare earth elements. These materials are essential for everything from smartphones to electric vehicle motors to military technology. China controls about 70% of the global supply. That's not because China has all the rare earth elements, it's because they're willing to extract them at any environmental cost. And now countries around the world are scrambling to find alternative sources or develop new technologies that don't depend on them. This is a vulnerability that keeps geopolitical leaders awake at night. In 2010, China restricted rare earth exports as a political move against Japan during a territorial dispute. Prices skyrocketed. Industries that depended on these materials faced real disruption. It was a wake-up call that showed how dependent the world had become on a single country's supply chain. Then there's phosphorus. It's not sexy. Nobody talks about phosphorus at dinner parties. We use it to make fertilizer. And fertilizer feeds about half the world's population. There are only a few major phosphorus deposits left, and they're concentrated in a handful of countries. Morocco controls about 75% of global reserves. If something happened to those deposits, if there was a conflict, if extraction became impossible, the implications for global food security would be catastrophic. Some researchers estimate that at current extraction rates, we could run out of economically viable phosphorus deposits within 50 to 130 years. That might sound like a long time, but it's not. That's within the lifespan of children being born today. Once it's gone, we can't synthesize it. We can't create it in a lab. We can only recycle what we already have. And right now, we're terrible at recycling phosphorus. Most of it ends up in landfills or polluting waterways. Here's what keeps me up at night about all of this. Most people don't understand how interconnected these systems are. Resource scarcity doesn't just mean we run out of one thing. It means cascading failures across multiple systems simultaneously. It means competition intensifies. It means countries start making decisions based on survival rather than cooperation. It means the rules that have held our global order together for the last 70 years start to break down. When you pull on one thread of the global resource system, the whole thing starts to unravel. Look at the map of the Middle East and Central Asia. The geopolitics of that region have been shaped almost entirely by oil. The United States built its entire Middle East strategy around securing oil supplies. Countries that control oil became incredibly powerful. Conflicts were fought over oil. Alliances were built around oil. But what happens when oil becomes less valuable? When the world transitions to renewable energy, the power structures shift. The alliances change. The conflicts that were fought over oil might be replaced by conflicts over water, over rare minerals, over agricultural land. And the transition period, that's the dangerous part. That's when the old order is dying, but the new order hasn't been established yet. That's when you get instability, uncertainty, and the potential for conflict. Now let's zoom out across the entire global system and think about what resource scarcity means for human civilization broadly. Throughout history, resource scarcity has driven conflict. It's driven migration, it's driven innovation. But the scale we're dealing with now is different. We're not talking about a regional drought affecting one kingdom. We're talking about global systems under stress simultaneously. We're talking about 8 billion people competing for finite resources. The implications are profound and multifaceted, and understanding them is crucial to navigating what comes next. First, there's the economic impact. As resources become scarcer, prices rise. That sounds simple, but it's not. Rising resource costs ripple through every industry. Energy becomes more expensive. Manufacturing becomes more expensive. Transportation becomes more expensive. Food becomes more expensive. The people who suffer first and hardest are the poorest, the most vulnerable. We're talking about billions of people living on less than $10 a day. For them, a 20% increase in food prices isn't an inconvenience. It's the difference between eating and going hungry. And here's the counterintuitive part. Resource scarcity doesn't just hurt poor countries. It creates instability everywhere. When people can't feed their families, they migrate. When they migrate, it creates political tension in receiving countries. When political tension rises, it can lead to conflict. So, resource scarcity in one part of the world becomes a security problem for everyone. The Syrian drought from 2006 to 2010 is a perfect example. It wasn't the only cause of the civil conflict that followed, but it contributed significantly. Crop failures forced rural farmers into cities, unemployment spiked, social tension increased. The conditions became ripe for conflict. And that conflict didn't stay in Syria. It created a refugee crisis that affected Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. One regional resource crisis rippled across the globe. Second, there's the geopolitical dimension. Resource-rich countries become more powerful. Countries that control critical minerals, that have access to fresh water, that can produce food. They gain leverage in global negotiations. We're already seeing this play out. Countries are forming new alliances based on resource access. They're investing heavily in securing supplies. Some are even using resource control as a tool to pressure other nations. This creates instability. It creates the conditions for conflict. Russia's use of natural gas exports as a political weapon against Europe is a clear example. When Russia cut off gas supplies to Ukraine in 2006 and 2009, it wasn't just about money, it was about power. It was about demonstrating that Russia controlled a resource that Europe desperately needed. This kind of resource-based coercion is going to become more common as resources become scarcer. Third, there's the environmental feedback loop. As we become more desperate for resources, we extract more aggressively. We mine in sensitive ecosystems. We pump aquifers dry. We clear forests for agricultural land. We burn more fossil fuels to power extraction and processing. This accelerates environmental degradation, which further reduces the resources available to us. It's a vicious cycle, and we're already in it. The Great Barrier Reef is dying because of climate change driven by fossil fuel extraction. That same fossil fuel extraction is driving the demand for more resources. We're destroying the very ecosystems that support human civilization in our rush to extract resources to power human civilization. It's madness when you think about it clearly. Fourth, there's the innovation imperative. Resource scarcity forces us to innovate. It pushes us toward efficiency, toward circular economy models, toward new materials and new technologies. This is actually the hopeful part. Throughout human history, when we faced resource constraints, we've found ways to overcome them. We've developed new technologies. We've found substitutes. We've learned to do more with less. But innovation takes time, and we don't have unlimited time. We need to accelerate this transition dramatically. When the price of whale oil became prohibitively expensive in the 1800s because whale populations were collapsing, people didn't just accept darkness. They innovated. They developed kerosene from petroleum. They eventually developed electricity. The transition wasn't instantaneous, but it happened. We need that same kind of innovation now, but we need it faster. Let me give you some specific examples of where we're facing critical resource constraints right now. Lithium is one. We need lithium for batteries, and battery technology is central to the transition away from fossil fuels. Global lithium demand is expected to grow tenfold by 2050. Currently, most lithium comes from South America, Australia, and China. The extraction process uses enormous amounts of water in already water-stressed regions. In Chile's Atacama Desert, lithium mining uses about 65% of the region's water supply. Meanwhile, the region is experiencing a severe drought. So, we're extracting the resources we need for renewable energy in a way that's destroying the local environment and making life impossible for local communities. It's a perfect example of how resource extraction in one place creates problems in that same place. Copper is another. We use copper in electrical wiring, in renewable energy systems, in electronics. As we transition to renewable energy and electric vehicles, copper demand is going to skyrocket. Some estimates suggest we'll need to extract as much copper in the next 25 years as we've extracted in all of human history. The problem is we've already found and mined the easy deposits. New discoveries are becoming rarer and more difficult to extract. And copper mining is incredibly destructive. It requires massive amounts of water. It produces toxic waste. It destroys ecosystems. We need copper to build a sustainable future, but the way we extract copper is fundamentally unsustainable. This one doesn't get nearly enough attention. Fertile topsoil is being lost at an alarming rate due to erosion, degradation, and poor agricultural practices. We're losing about 24 billion tons of fertile soil every year. At the same time, global population is growing, and we need to produce more food. The math doesn't work. We need to fundamentally transform how we grow food, how we manage land, how we think about agriculture. Industrial agriculture has been incredibly productive in the short term, but it's destroying the soil that makes agriculture possible. We're mining soil like it's a non-renewable resource, even though it should be renewable if we managed it properly. So what does all of this mean for you? For your future? Here's the thing. Resource scarcity is going to shape every major decision that affects your life over the next few decades. Where you live, what kind of work you do, what kind of technology is available to you, how much energy and resources you have access to, all of it will be influenced by resource constraints. The job market is going to shift toward industries focused on resource efficiency and circular economy solutions. Real estate values are going to be determined increasingly by access to water and arable land. The cost of living is going to rise as resource prices rise. Your quality of life, your opportunities, your children's future, all of it is connected to how we handle resource scarcity. But here's also the hopeful part. We're not helpless. We're not locked into a future of scarcity and conflict. We have choices. We can choose to transition to a circular economy where we reuse and recycle materials instead of constantly extracting new ones. We can choose to invest heavily in sustainable agriculture and regenerative practices. We can choose to develop new technologies that reduce our resource intensity. We can choose to cooperate internationally rather than compete. These choices are within our power. The challenge is that these transitions require massive changes. They require political will. They require investment. They require us to think long-term instead of quarter to quarter. They require us to accept some short-term costs for long-term stability. And that's hard. That goes against a lot of our instincts and incentives. But consider the alternative. Consider what happens if we don't make these changes. Consider a world where resource conflicts become more frequent and more intense. Consider a world where billions of people are displaced because they can't access the resources they need to survive. Consider a world where the global order breaks down because cooperation becomes impossible. That's not inevitable, but it's possible. It's a real scenario that we need to take seriously. History shows us that when resource constraints become severe enough, societies collapse. The Maya civilization, the Roman Empire, Easter Island, they all faced resource constraints they couldn't overcome. They made choices that seemed rational in the short term, but led to long-term collapse. We have the advantage of seeing these historical examples. We can learn from them. We don't have to repeat them. The good news is that we're starting to wake up to this reality. Governments are beginning to invest in resource efficiency and circular economy initiatives. Companies are starting to think about supply chain resilience and sustainable sourcing. Researchers are developing new technologies that could transform how we extract, process, and use resources. It's not happening fast enough, but it's happening. What we need now is acceleration. We need to move faster on renewable energy. We need to transform agriculture. We need to develop new materials and extraction technologies. We need to build international agreements that prioritize long-term stability over short-term gains. We need to invest in education so that people understand these challenges and can contribute to solutions. We need to foster innovation at every level, from grassroots to government. And here's where it gets really interesting. Resource scarcity might actually be the catalyst that pushes us toward a more sustainable, more equitable, more resilient civilization. Throughout history, constraints have driven innovation and progress. The question is whether we can make this transition consciously and deliberately, or whether we'll be forced into it by crisis and conflict. I believe we can do this. I believe we have the knowledge, the technology, and the capability to build a civilization that thrives within planetary boundaries. But it requires us to think differently. It requires us to see resource scarcity not as a problem to be solved through extraction and exploitation, but as a signal that we need to fundamentally transform how we live and work. The next few decades are critical. The decisions we make now, the investments we make, the technologies we develop, the policies we implement, all of it will determine whether we navigate resource scarcity successfully or whether we stumble into conflict and collapse. This is our generation's defining challenge. This is what we'll be remembered for. Our children and grandchildren will look back at this moment and ask, what did you do when you saw the resource constraints coming? Did you act? Did you innovate? Did you cooperate? Or did you pretend it wasn't happening until it was too late? So here's my challenge to you. Start thinking about your relationship with resources. Where does your water come from? Where does your food come from? What materials went into the devices you use? What's your carbon footprint? What's your resource footprint? Once you start asking these questions, you start seeing the systems that support your life. And once you see those systems, you can start making choices that are more sustainable, more conscious, more aligned with long-term stability. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to change everything overnight. But you can start. You can educate yourself. You can make different choices. You can support policies and companies that prioritize sustainability. You can talk to your friends and family about these issues. You can vote with your wallet and your ballot. Small actions add up. When millions of people start making more conscious choices, it creates momentum. It creates political pressure. It creates market demand for sustainable solutions. Subscribe to Future Frontiers for more on how we're navigating the challenges ahead. This channel explores the big ideas that will shape our future. And resource scarcity is one of the most critical conversations we need to be having right now.